Good morning, welcome. Thanks for coming in early. My name's Michael Desrochers. I'm Managing Director of PoliteMail, and I'll be presenting today with Bobby Morrison from Expedia.
And hi, everybody. I'm, as he said, Bobby Morrison. I'm the manager of EIT, Communications and Engagement for Expedia Group. Thank you.
All right. And how many of you use email as like your primary employee communication channel? Perfect. So that's what we'll be talking about mostly today. What PoliteMail does, we add some tools into Outlook, primarily to help you measure if people are even reading the communications you're sending out, and then kind of help optimize volume and cadence and that type of thing. One of the questions people ask is, like, does measuring your communications actually help you improve how things are going? And this is some data. So every year we pull what we call a benchmark data. So we have a large set, about just over 50% of our customers from the cloud basis participate in this benchmark. So we pull anonymous aggregate data and we compile it up, and we look at what's an average read time, what's an average click rate, and then we break that down by industry and then share that with our customers. And that's what this data is from. So what this is showing you is for PoliteMail users that have used the product for 2 years, this is the type of improvements that they were able to achieve on average. So not a big increase in open rate, because really open's just a measure of reach, what size your audience is. But significant improvements in terms of read time. So 25% improvements in read time, 21% engagement, over 40% in click rate. So once you have some instrumentation around what people are doing with email, you can use that data to help you make changes, and then really get to what you're trying to achieve is people are reading the communications and taking the actions. You want them to take, changing behaviors, that type of thing. And what Bobby will talk about is his experience in Expedia, and he even has some improvements that are significantly better than these average numbers. Take it away. Speak a little louder.
Yeah. How about now? Most of you are probably familiar with Expedia. Most people think of Expedia as Expedia.com. Expedia is actually a family of quite a few different travel websites, so Hotels.com, Hotwire, et cetera. The challenge that my team and I had was, how do you take technology, news, and information and provide it to the whole company? Talking about new releases, new technologies, new things like that. It hadn't really been done before that I was aware of. And we wanted to be able to communicate out to the business and tell them what new technologies, new things were happening. With that, we started with email, we did blogs, we did a whole bunch of things. The only feedback that we were getting was anecdotal. We would be told that, hey, your messages are going great, and had a lot of really positive feedback. But when we were asked the question, how exactly are we doing? I couldn't answer the question. And we had tried other mail tools that would give us some metrics, and that was all good, but they were really kind of sluggish and hard to work with. Not to poke at any other brands or any other products, but they couldn't fulfill our needs of needing to be agile, be on the fly, and be able to send communications on a whim almost. And so when we engaged with PoliteMail, we really wanted to learn how to improve engagement. We needed to control our volumes, but we didn't have any data to back it up. We knew we had to make changes. As I had said, we tried other solutions. Basically, I just rattled off this entire slide without going to the slide, so apologies for that. And we are dependent, just like all of you, on Outlook email as the primary messaging for our company. And as Peter Drucker said, if you can't measure it, or if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So the solution, we needed to find a solution that was quick and agile, fast for us, that didn't take a lot of time for us to be able to gather email distributions or individuals and then have to load them up individually and separately. We wanted to use our own distribution list. We wanted to be able to just produce something on the fly and ship it. And with that, I'm going to hand it over back to
yeah. So this
Michael
is
for a
just
second.
some data from the benchmark survey, and what I wanted to highlight here was just, on average, employees are receiving about 20 minutes of email communication, but they're only reading generally about 9 minutes. So by understanding what the ask is from employees, right, and also what the ask is of your team, how much content you're producing, that type of thing, and then knowing how much people are actually going to consume, you can cut back on the amount of work you're doing or how you're composing those messages or what you're sending out, and optimize that to the time people will actually give you. A couple other things to note is in the data we'll see most of your interactions are going to happen immediately or within 4 hours after you send the email. So email is always an interruption, and so we'll have some data here. So knowing that, you can kind of tune your distributions to fit into the employee's kind of daily workflow. We released a new feature in August that was time zone sending. So instead of always sending the email on your time, you can actually send it on the employee's time. So if you want it to hit their inbox at 9 a.m., the tool will automatically break the distribution up and distribute it globally at the recipient's time instead of your time, which tends to work. Well, we're seeing a big increase in mobile. Some of you probably today will use that a lot, right? You'll be on your mobile device checking your email. I will. We've seen that trend growing, and now that it used to be that mobile opens were growing very quickly, but mobile clicks were not. But now that more and more companies are enabling mobility software, right? So you can access your intranet from your mobile site. So when you click a link, it actually goes somewhere. So we've seen quite a bit, over 20% increase in actual click-through on mobile devices. So having a tool that helps you build mobile responsive emails, which native Outlook tends not to. If you put a big picture in your Outlook email and send it out, all of a sudden your font size shrinks to tiny on your phone. So our tool has some capabilities to add that responsive design in, so it works on mobile, works on desktop, and when we're measuring interactions, we're measuring individual behaviors as well. So if you send an email and the same person opens it on their desktop as well as their mobile or vice versa, we're going to count that as one open, not two opens. So the data is accurate in terms of a person. And then these are just some averages. So at the end, we have this benchmark data that if you wanted to compare your rates against benchmark rates or just know generally what a good or average click-through is or read time or open rate is, we have these benchmark numbers. So on average across our customer base, these are kind of what people, what you expect or what they expect to get on average. And then some other things, the types of things that you'll be able to measure, time of day, day of week, geographic location. You can measure metrics over time so you can see trends in terms of behavior. Am I making improvements or not? So all those tools are available right inside of your Outlook.
So needless to say, obviously I'm here. And I'm here because I really am very happy that we found this tool. And so is our leadership. We have, as you can see here, we were...
So this is just,
sure.
is benchmark data. So leading into Bobby's where they started from. So this was that benchmark I mentioned. So by industry, so metrics by industry and metrics by distribution size. And then the next slide is that one you were comparing against.
Right. But really quick, as far as this one goes, we when we were sending our communications and communicating with our business, we only cared for the most part, or at least our leadership did, that people were reading our messages and that we had a good adoption. But like we said before, there was no way to really measure that adoption. And I went out and saw a lot of these same types of metrics from an industry standard, and then was able to say, wow, you know what? We have no real baseline to measure our success against. And this is the technology sector. And as you can see from looking at the averages in the technology sector, the unique sends right around 70%, average attention rate about 59, read rate 36.3, et cetera, et cetera. You can read all the way down here. We knew that we had to find our own targets, and that's a little bit unique. Not to go too much down a rabbit hole, but when you're in an IT industry or when you're in the technology sector, it's not like your corporate communications where everybody is going to be interested in, I don't know, the event that's coming to the building that might get communicated to the whole company, or new commute schedules or things like that. You really have to try to, I don't want to say sell, but you do have to advertise the technology, which was, again, something a little bit new. But at the same time, we knew that we couldn't just go with the industry standard as far as what those metrics were. We had to define our own KPIs. We had to define it for ourselves, what made the most sense. And so when we started out, we had first gotten Polite Mail. We were so excited. We sent our first mail. It went out to about 20,000 employees, which is, at the time, a couple of years back, we had about 22,000. And the message had some visuals, but it wasn't really visually strong. It contained a lot of topics. There was a lot of content in that mail, and that was what we had previously been doing. And ultimately, that made it really long. Nobody wants to have to scroll, when it comes especially to a technology message. Oh, I'll go back here for a second. So you can see some of the results that we got, not too shabby of an open rate. It's pretty decent, not bad. But you look at the read rate, and it was down at 24%. And we kind of scratched our heads. Wow, that's not that great. And the click-through, I mean, even though we only had, I think, 2 or 3 links, actually, I think 4 in that first message, still 3%. People weren't clicking on anything. We were having a tough time that I didn't even know about, trying to get people engaged in what it was that we were trying to communicate to them. But over time, after having those metrics and being able to see the data, and I'll point out something interesting here in a second. We were able to recognize that, and this was on our own. I mean, granted, we do a lot of white paper reading and a lot of digging into the industry information and going to conferences, things like that, learning about new things. But at the same time, we still thought messages have to be long. We have to contain everything just in this one place so that everybody in the company knows exactly what it is that we're trying to communicate. That's not really the case, and that's not really the best way to get to your employees. So we knew that we had to be more short and concise. We had to really direct our topics. And we had to use imagery instead of just being the pretty, the pretty picture that's up on the side of the email. We knew we needed to use visuals to kind of guide the employee to where we wanted them to go. Seems pretty straightforward and seems pretty logical, but a lot of those things don't get taken into account when you're just, when you're the IT or technology organization talking to a company about internal products and services. But as you can see, this particular message, and this is what I was going to call out, you can see that this wasn't to 22,000 employees, but that was because we targeted the messages. And now we're targeting as much as we can to individual business groups based on the data that we got from Polite Mail. We're being very target specific, and like I said, using that imagery to guide the employee where we want them to go. And with that, we are now seeing, this isn't an average This is a pretty good number, but an open rate of 85.6, I feel like you can't do much better than that. Read rate of 64, click-through, et cetera, et cetera. Click-through was 45% on this particular message, and the attention rate was almost 100%. So from the knowledge that we gained and over lots of use and experience, we were able to really switch things around. Here's an example of one of those older messages off to the left. You can see it's very newslettery, lots of content, lots of stuff. Nowadays, I open something like that from another organization or from something external, and all I see is text. I almost don't want to read it. And that's why now everything that we're doing is short and concise messaging. Things to grab people's eyes, visuals to grab eyes, using QR codes, directing people to other places that they can read more if they're interested, et cetera. And we can measure that, and that's huge. So you can see not too bad of numbers over there with the older message, but there is definitely an improvement as you go over to the right with the 70% open rate, 30 read, et cetera. And I'll pass it back to Mike.
Yeah, this is just some data to kind of back up that evidence. So again, looking at those 200 million messages, and we break those down by length of message, how long it would take someone to read it. And you can kind of see the shorter the email, like the optimum, that under 2 minutes, which is roughly anything under 500 words. So if you can keep your messages under that, that's going to give you the optimum read rates. And as you can just see how quickly it falls off. As you send those longer and longer messages, less and less people are going to read that content. And this same thing, this is measuring engagement. And so read time is just how long people are reading. Engagement is a metric we put together that combines both the readership and the click rates together into one metric. So again, the evidence really strong. If the message is under 2 minutes, your engagement levels are going to be the highest. And same thing, with clicks. There's some interesting point here. So just more evidence, shorter messages, higher click rate. And then I may have it, I'll switch it back to Bobby. I may have it later, but I'll just mention it now since it's on my mind. But we did an analysis of the number of links that are contained in a message related to the click rate. Because again, a lot of times in those longer communications, you're sending people like, here's 10 things that you might want to do, right? But if you really want someone to do something, the highest possible click rate occurs when you send one link. And also if that one link can be at the top of the email, that's going to give you the very best click-through rate. So it makes sense, right? You give people one thing to do, right? The message is about one thing, say open enrollment, here's the link, I want you to do it by this time. You're way more apt to get people to click through than if you give them a longer message with multiple links through it. So intuitively it makes sense, data backs it up.
And to kind of prove Michael's point, I don't want to take us too far here, but in comparison, just these two screenshots I added here, there's one link, and the link is a QR code. And then actually the real message that went out had the actual URL, the link to the survey underneath. So one link and provided for 2 different avenues, either a click for a desktop or scan it with your barcode scanner and be taken directly to the survey on your mobile. So basically proving the point. One link, best way to go. I mean, obviously, dependent upon your message and your audience, you may have 1 or 2 or more, but we really try hard to keep it concise, and if more information has to go out with additional links, we'll do that separately. One of the other things that we knew we had to do to be able to target our audiences was, we're EIT Communications, and that's basically the shared mailbox that we have. As we started to progress and grow and evolve, I used to be an incident and release manager at my current company and at another company. And I knew that in order to get people to read system issues or changes or things like that, if everything comes out from one mailbox, we found that people weren't really reading it and our readership was starting to go down. So we developed multiple mailboxes to send from. EIT Communications is news and information about technology, issue management, obviously, issue management. Mac Communications, because we have a pretty significant Mac community at Expedia Group, and mobile. So you questions anything about mobile, that's where we're sending it from. We also went and developed visuals, consistent visuals with what I call service identifiers, help kind of define the message visually and help define what you're going to be reading about as soon as you see the visual in the email. If you see Meet, you know we're going to be talking about meetings, collaboration tools, things like that. If we have Develop, we're going to be talking about software or technology development, or even career and people development. So it has actually made readership, it has improved readership doing A/B testing between different headers and different things. We've been able to see differences in the responses. So we also, what I was mentioning before about issue management, this is a couple examples of the production issues, the types of things that we would send out if there was an actual production issue. Text has been changed in order to protect the innocent. So these are not real issues, but just an example of the types of ways that some visual changes and some template changes will actually improve the way that your readers, or improve the adoption by your readers. And here's another example. This is technology news. It's a little more flashy, not as cold. It's a little less formal, and inspires people to read. It's blocked out so that it captures the eye and directs people to where they need to go to read. We also developed a communications calendar so that internal and teams outside of EIT, if they need to know like what's on the schedule for upcoming news and information. We also don't want to trip over our friends in global communications on the business side, or some of the other brand or siloed communications groups. So we can actually compare our calendar with their calendars and make sure that we're all not tripping over each other at the same time. With that,
all right.
I'll hand you back to
So
Michael for
a little
some
bit of
metrics.
backup data here. Basically just shows how the use of images can actually improve readership and how much of your content people actually read. So you can see kind of the two ends of the bell curve, right? So a traditional email, an all text type Outlook message that you might send still works very well, right? But then once you add, just a banner or just a small image, your actual readership goes down. But once you tip the balance to more images than text, once you get over that 50% rate, your readership goes up. So visual works, which is probably good news to most of you. Most communicators are creative. They like to use more visuals. This is the evidence that shows you, if you do that, you can improve your readership. So not everything has to be all text. And of course, someone asked me in one of the presentations, so that means I can just use any old clip art? Probably not. We don't measure content of the message, but being communicators, the more people images, the images of employees in action, authentic type images, not clip art, is what's going to work best, of course. And some other related data. This is just the difference. So we did an analysis of a bunch of different stuff, but this is based on cadence. And so the way we define cadence is to the same list from the same address, messages that are going out at the same, on a routine schedule versus messages that are just going out on no apparent schedule. And you can see there's quite a bump. That top line is kind of showing you the increase, and then the bottom line is showing you kind of the optimal cadence based on those metrics. But when you set your email up on a routine schedule, you can improve your readership by almost 20% on average across the board. So just by working yourself, almost think of it like a channel, and that's partly what Bobby did with those from addresses, right? So instead of everything coming from communications you set up, and it's, it's very easy. It's obviously an IT ask, but you get multiple shared mailboxes, email addresses that you can send from, because the from address and then the subject line are the two things that recipients are going to use to filter the message, right? If they're going to pay attention to a message, it's better that they can say, oh, this is about X based on the from address. So if you set up those channels and then you make those channels, that calendar that Bobby was showing you, is like there's routine messages that go out on a set schedule, and then employees can start to build that into their workday. They know when it's going to arrive. They can expect it. It's not an interruption. If it's relevant to them, then they start paying more attention to those messages, which is what the data is showing here, is that when you're on a routine, your attention and readership will go up. And this is, so I did have this slide. We already talked about it. Send one link. And more attention. So just to describe attention, and again, this was a point that Bobby made earlier, right? And sometimes you don't have the lists, but if you do have the lists, and we have some tools that help give communicators the ability to kind of build ad hoc lists on the fly based on different employee attributes. But the more you can target your message, right, the more relevant it is, the higher your metrics are going to be. But just to explain what attention rate is, so there's open rate, right? Someone actually looked at it, they previewed it, they looked at it on their mobile device. That's an email open. But what we do is, since we're calculating the read time, if they have it open for more than 3 seconds, then we're going to say they gave it attention. So if they immediately just preview it and move to the next one, or they just swipe or delete or whatever they do, if they're on it just really quickly, we're not counting that as any attention. So that's gives you more information than just an open.
All right. Thank you. And I want to reemphasize, as much as I'm speaking about what we have done, when I first started this team years back, like I'd mentioned, there wasn't a technology communications team. It was kind of unheard of. And when I had brought it up, it wasn't something that originally our leadership was keen on. And then I fought for it, and nevertheless, there it was. It wasn't until Politemail that we really had that measurement to back us up, and that was what was critical. So a lot of the things that I've showed you so far are things that we've learned and grown with while growing with using this product after trying other things. So again, just wanted to kind of reiterate that point. And that's kind of the point here. It's knowing where to improve, and that was the catalyst for our larger efforts. So my favorite thing, one of my favorite things, and I think I mentioned this in the beginning, in other tools, and again, not speaking bad of them, some of them are really good and they have a lot of really good information, or a really good look and feel when you see the message that's sent. You can do all the same things with Politemail, but you don't have to go and just grab like HR feeds or data and then try to import them for every message. And that was something that was, quite frankly, killing us. Because if we have to be agile and send like an issue communication on the fly, people expect that to go out within 10 to 15 minutes tops from the recognition of the outage. With a web-based tool, we weren't able to go in and get all the user data and make sure that we're targeting the right audience, anything else. We were struggling. So we went back to just using those other tools for news and information, and keeping just straight email templates and things like that, direct Outlook for issues and things like that. After Politemail, we were able to put everything directly into the templates within the Outlook add-in. And then also be able to go to our distribution list, our own global address list, if we wanted to, and send from there, which is really nice. And be able to get the metrics based on that. And like Michael said, if we wanted to further target, we can go grab those HR feeds. We could go grab those user groups, combine them with DLs, and then upload that into Politemail so that we can just click a button, have our audience immediately get metrics. So pretty cool. We also started to use a schedule send. We're a global company, so a message that I might send at 9 a.m. in Bellevue, everybody in Bellevue is going to read that. Maybe a few folks in EMEA might read that at the end of their day leaving. People in APAC won't see it till tomorrow. So we can actually schedule different sends of the same message to correspond with different areas of the world. And what's really nice is you can ROM peel it. And what I mean by that, set it, and yay. So that's what we've been able to do, and it's been extremely successful, and we've been very happy. But that's not the end of the story. Email, as you guys all know, is the primary, and it still is, and it still will be probably for some time, the primary outlet for people to, especially in a corporate environment, read news and information, either your company intranet or the emails that come out to the employees. And what we've tried to do is hit multiple different mediums combined with our email, tie them all together visually, and try to make more of a cohesive entity, more of a cohesive brand. And now, when people see EIT, they know what they know what to expect. They know what information they're going to be receiving, et cetera. So, happy about that. Do we want to open up for questions?
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Michael or myself?
There we go. Wondering if you could talk a little about the design templates, if they're part of this package.
Yep. Yeah, so there's what we call a template builder. So there's a bunch of basically pre-designed layout components, and you can assemble them into a page, so header, body elements, footer, and then you can save them and share them with the team. So if you go and you build your own banner or header, or you have certain layouts, then you can save them and distribute it to the team. And then everyone can kind of work off that same page. Yep.
There was a question over here. Oh, sorry.
Hi, I have a question. You had the open rate and the read rate. Can you explain the difference? And for you, why was the read rate so important to increase? Like,
Yeah,
what
so-
does that measure tell you?
Yep. So the open rate is really just telling you what I call it reach, right? Did someone look at it? So usually if you're in an Outlook environment, so if you're using an email marketing tool, a good open rate tends to be in the 20-25% range, because most people, like if you receive marketing email, right, you get that click to download pictures. If you don't download the pictures, you're not sending the data back to the sender. So you're getting a lot less data. When you're internal communications, those images will download automatically. So as soon as someone previews it, even if it's for a second, it counts as an open. Same thing on your mobile, right? As soon as any of that content comes up in the preview pane, it's officially opened. So it's really just telling you, if you sent to 10,000 people and you got an 80% open rate, you reached 8,000 of those 10,000. But it's not telling you anything more than that, right? You don't know if they immediately deleted it or if they just moved on to the next one. So open rate's really just, how many people saw the message. And then with the read rate, we're basically timing how long they're actually viewing that page. So if you sent 200, 250 words of content, right? If they read everything, it would take them about a minute. So if your read rate, if they spend that much time, so we'll tell you on average how long people spent. We have certain thresholds, so we have like ignored, skimmed, read, engaged, and each of those, goes so under 3 seconds, under 30%, over 50%. So you can get kind of some metrics of how much time people are actually spending on the content. And that's why that chart I had before, where you saw as those messages got longer and longer, the read time went lower and lower, just because people just aren't going to, you might send 10,000 words, but they're not going to read that many. And then Bobby, if you have any.
Well, all I was going to say is, I think based on what Michael just said, I think that kind of answers the question to an extent. Open rate's really important to us. Not open rate, read rate's really important to us, because a lot of the information we're sending, we try to make it as non-techy, that's the easiest way I can say it, non-technical as possible. So we cater to our audience. It's a really broad audience, everybody from sales, marketing, administration, everything, media. So we know that we're talking to a very broad audience, and if we can get read rates within the metric that we're targeting and that we're shooting for, then we know that people are actually reading it. We know that the information is getting out there, and that if there's an action required, especially, then we can safely, we can measure that, who has actually clicked through, who has actually read the message. Are we engaging our employees the way that we should be because of the news and information that we've brought to them? Like a new release, you have to go in and change your login. If they don't read the mail, they're never going to know.
Yeah, and one of the things you can do too, particularly with clicks, but you can also do it with any metric, is you can actually follow up based on people's behavior. So if you wanted to resend a message to everyone that didn't click a certain link, or you wanted to resend a message to everyone that ignored it, you can get to those segments of the audience and then do a follow-up email.
I think we had right here.
Hi. We've been using Polite for about a year now. And one thing I still can't figure out, the engagement metric.
Yeah?
Sometimes that doesn't jive with the click rate and the read rate. I'm just curious as to, our leaders have kind of glommed onto that one because it's typically very high.
Right.
And we're trying to change a lot of behaviors.
Yep. Well, so the trick, the way we have, so the engagement, it's kind of a calculation that is the percent read plus the click rate, but it's not. But the math works so that it can't go over 100%. So it's not the read rate, but it's the percent read. So in other words, if on average people read 50% of your content, so that's the baseline of your engagement rate. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that 50%, subtract it from 100%. So now you have 50% left over, and we'll take that, multiply by your click-through rate. So if your click-through rate is 50%, then it's going to be 50 of 50 is 25, plus the 50 is a 75% engagement rate, right? So I know it's a little bit of a math exercise, but we have some documentation that explains it.
Okay.
But it's a combination. Now, the one thing that we've had feedback on from some of our clients, like Microsoft, they use data analysts to actually look at the metrics and then make internal recommendations. Because most communicators, they're not data analysts. You can use the key metrics, make some decisions, but if you really want someone to break things down, you need someone that works with data a lot. Where was I going with that? What was I saying? Lost
The
my
data
place.
analysts are.
Yeah, it was something to do with the engagement, and I just totally lost my mind there on that.
One thing I might be able to suggest for you,
Yes.
and this is what we did. Some of our leaders, so my immediate leadership, my immediate team, they were mostly concerned with the read rate and with the click-through rate. But then just like your folks, they saw that engagement and were just like, how can we get this up? Well, it's kind of an algorithm. So what we did was go out to the KB, I think it's kb.politemail.com.
Yeah.
So the knowledge base that exists for everything Politemail, and I got to tell you, as far as KBs go, it's pretty robust. And you can find that description and then kind of break it down for your leadership and explain to them, this is a really good metric to have, but where your focus might want to be is still over here.
Well, a lot of executives work with numbers all the time. So if you show them the math, they can usually explain it. Now I remember what I was going to say. The engagement rate we have is engagement of the people that opened it. But some of the data analysts have basically pointed out, well, that's not overall. There's an overall engagement, which you really need to subtract out. Because if your audience size is at 10,000, but you only got 8,000 people to look at it, you should subtract out that for 20% that didn't open the email. So we're going to actually have two engagement numbers, like the engaged. We haven't quite figured out the names because it's or we might try a different name. But there's total engagement, and then there's engagement of people that opened the message. So that might be part of the conflict, is when you look at if you have if you have a low open rate, you can still have a high engagement rate.
That's exactly where
right,
it was. And
right. Yep.
Yep.
And that's the
From your experience, what have you kind of guided them with the metrics that is really telling? Is it the read rate?
It really is.
Yeah.
And to be honest, and I can't really emphasize this as much, we are a technology company, and we're a technology organization within a technology company. So what my leadership is really focused on is making sure that people understand what it is that we're shipping. So they mostly just care about that read rate, for the most part. Not to say that click-through is not important or whatever else. Obviously it is, especially with survey links and things like that we might be sending. But a lot of the other metrics, I'll be honest, no offense, Michael, a lot of it we don't need. But the beauty of it, and I don't work for PoliteMail, I do work for Expedia Group, I promise. The beauty of it is I've never seen another tool that has more available metrics, so that your data scientists and your people that do that type of work and socialize that back up to leadership have that much information to work with. Most of the time it really is confined to about the 5 or 6 top key metrics that you can get from a message that goes out based on, or from most of the web-based tools that I've seen. Thank you.
Good morning. How did you work with your subject matter experts and maybe your business partners to get them away from like the 10,000 word email to the 500 word email? That's a real challenge for us. We look like your before and we aspire to your after.
It's a good question. Honestly,
the data can help.
yeah.
We had a client in worked for a financial company in Chicago, and he had a couple of executives that were very, I guess, aggressive about what they wanted the email to look like and what they wanted it to be. And he, being communicator, he was like, no, but he, it wasn't his decision. But then once he had the data and was able to show them the data, they completely turned around. Because he actually did, you can do like A/B testing, you can do like 2 options, send it to party audience, and then get the metrics. What he actually did is he did, he did it their way, and then the next month he did it his way. He worked with them to say, look, I want to do this as an experiment. He did it, the numbers were dramatically different. And then that was, as soon as he showed them the data, and again, they're executives, they look at sales numbers and financial numbers all the time. They like, okay, I understand, do it your way. Yeah. So that's where the data can really come into play. And sometimes too, like I've seen this, actually we have a case study from Microsoft. They, one of their groups was did a newsletter, and what they were trying to achieve, they got a lot of employee feedback about, basically like we're getting too many emails coming from too many different directions. It's not working for us. And so Tracy Grove was the leader of that group at the time. She's like, oh, I know what we'll do. We'll consolidate all these up and roll them into a monthly newsletter and send it out. And they did that. And she found like the numbers just fell through the floor. People weren't happy about it. They still said, you're giving us too much, still too much email. And it wasn't too much email, it was too much content, right? So then they totally did a bunch of experiments and surveys and basically came up with this strategy, which she called popcorn email. So she actually upped the email volume, in some cases almost 1 a day, but they kept the content really short and really visual, and their metrics went way up. She was hitting almost 100% engagement at the end of it. So it was completely counterintuitive strategy to actually send more email, but make it a lot less content, and people can just digest that a lot faster. So that's just another case where the data can help drive your decision making.
And on that point, sorry, when you asked the initial question, I had to think about it for a second because I'm a humble person. I don't ever want to toot a horn. Before 2 years ago, before we engaged with PoliteMail, it was a party of 1. I was a team of me for 20 some odd thousand people. And after reading the metrics and the data which PoliteMail provided us, I was able to then go back to our product teams, and I'm sure you're probably all right now working with product managers or product teams. They help talk to the business directly through focus groups and through some of these other things. I partnered really closely with them in all of the different brand silos and said, what's important to you? What do you really want to know? When it comes to technology, what do you care about? And from that, we were able to, using polite mail data, able to kind of say, oh, you know what? As Michael said, through A/B testing and through other things, we were able to really shorten and concisely shrink our messages down and point people where we wanted them to go. So email basically became news and information and also just a little bit of traffic cop. And that's good. That's, for us, that's what we needed to do. So sorry. Go ahead.
Hey, great information. I'm really loving all this. One thing jumped out at me that was just a tiny little footnote in one of your slides that mentioned that it was at an 8th grade reading level. And that question just came up this week. We were like, wonder what reading level we should be targeting for our employees. And is there a best practice around that for corporate
Yeah.
comms? And also, how do you know what reading level you're at when you're writing?
That's a good question. So this, if you download the benchmark survey, there's actually a graphic in there on reading ease. So Word will actually calculate your Fleisch reading ease score, 1 through 10. I think it's 10 being easiest and 1 being most difficult. In our data, it's kind of a barbell, and we have a high number of technology clients. Technology companies tend to send, there's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of words, so that tends to push it up on the difficult to read scale. But what you'll notice is in terms of the readership rates, if you can get down on that easiest scale, that's going to give you the best readership. So right now, we actually calculate that when we send the email, but the thing we don't do is we don't display that to the user at any given point. So that's something we're going to be adding in, is actually showing you what the reading ease is, and give you the ability to see that as you're composing the message, and then you might be able to make edits to bring that down. So it's the only way to get it right now is you take your content, paste it into Word, and then get it from Word.
Hello. I would say I'm a polite mail power user. We use it all the time. But one of the things that we're trying to do is strike the right balance between making it look great and it being accessible. And even this morning at Microsoft, we had our chief accessibility officer email us telling us to make sure that we check our emails for accessibility. And oftentimes I find myself trying to make something that looks great on a mobile phone, but easy to read.
Right.
Not a lot of pictures, so I wonder if you have any advice on how we can get that readability, make it look great, but without a dependency on pictures.
Right. Well, you can. I know there's. So for Microsoft, we did some custom templates that are really text and color based. So it still has big color blocks, with the brand colors and stuff, and then you can use it mostly text. I think the accessibility. Is that mostly to do with color contrast, or? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Find that balance without relying on things that may look crazy when you're looking at it on your phone, like pictures all over the place, not the way you want it to look,
Right.
but also making it accessible. Point of your email because it's not a lot of text.
Right. Oh, like if they have pictures off or something? Is that?
Or if we just balance of making it look great,
Yeah.
but we don't do a great job of making sure that.
Right. Yeah, I guess I just don't understand accessibility enough maybe to comment on that. But it's something I know we do a lot of the HR programs for Microsoft. We do kind of on a customized template basis, because a lot of times it's not, it doesn't quite fit the standard template, so we custom code it for that team. And we have had accessibility kickbacks on some of those. And I don't know, I have a different team that does that. I don't know the details, but I can certainly talk to them because obviously it's something that's, if it's important to you, it's going to be important to other customers. So it'd be good to understand. But I can, grab your card after and see what we can do to help.
Thank you. If you're relying on images and layout to deliver a message rather than to complement a message, then if you can't see those images and layout, then you can't follow the flow. So for example, if there's a QR code, it's important to have an alternative, or to say there is a link in this photo. You need to click on that link rather than assuming a level of ability to be able to do that. You know,
Okay.
so.
So like you said, you need to put the description text in every image, right?
Sounds like to use color as a way to help with that, and maybe not so much straight up images.
Yeah, you could. You can certainly use color blocks, to still make it visually attractive and separate sections without putting the huge image in there. You can also, you probably know in Outlook, right? You can right-click an image and then get into the menu and put in your descriptions and alt tags and that stuff, which may, if the description's in there and the image doesn't display, then it shows the description text. So maybe that addresses some of the accessibility issues.
Okay.
I'll play around with it. If there's the accessibility tool, I'll play around with that in Outlook and see what it tells me.
All right, are there any more questions? We got time for one more question and we'll get to opening keynote.
I know you mentioned that the optimal length was 500 words or like a 1-minute read. And I'm curious for those messages that are like 700 or 1,000 words, if you find engagement is higher to include it all in one message or include a link to like a landing page which includes the full text.
Right. It's hard to say exactly because we're, when we're looking at the benchmark data, it's it's averages across a large number. So that 500 word, that's under like 2 minutes. But you can see like in that benchmark data, you can see like once you get over that, it starts to drop down. So, that would be a perfect test case, right? So if the whole story is really 700 words, you could do, let's send half of the full one, and let's send the other half that's like the 200-word synopsis with a link, and then see which one works better, right? And then you'll have your own evidence.
Yeah. And if I could add, it's going to be different company by company, audience by audience. And like I was mentioning before, what we did was went out and meeting with the internal teams through either a product team or another group or their leadership and interviewing them and finding out not just based on the data and the metrics, but finding out what their flavor is. So for example, there are some groups that really do actually prefer the one-stop shop. If you're going to send them an email, then they want to see everything. They don't want to click. They don't want to go anywhere else. They just want to be able to read it and be done with it, and that's it. But other groups, if you're like me, they want to see immediately what do I need to know, and it needs to be a pop right in front of me. And if there is additional information, that's my choice. I'm not forced to read it. I can choose. So it's really going to depend on department by department and who your audience is. So content audience is always going to be the balance.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Bobby. Polite Mail will be around for the whole conference. So.